My name is Kate Coiner, TruthFinder, a background verification tool designed to help people research who they're actually connecting with online and utilize that information to stay safe. We're talking about one of the fastest growing tech-enabled crimes on the planet, romance scams and online dating deception, with Laurel House, a dating and behavioral dynamics expert, 5-time published author and eHarmony relationship coach, and Dr. Alex Del Carmen, a criminologist and expert in criminal psychology who studies how manipulators hunt and con people. He educates FBI agents at Quantico and law enforcement agencies around the world on how to identify and combat romance scammers. Laurel and Dr. Alex are a power duo that bring together the dating mind and the criminal mind. They help people recognize red flags, understand the psychology behind manipulation, fight and prevent scams, and help people rebuild trust and real love.
I've been a dating coach for almost 20 years, and I have seen so many clients be conned and help them to get through it, identify it, and get out from under it after. I had a client who she used to be so happy and cheerful and bubbly. Then she was conned out of $60,000, and it devastated her. It changed her personality for a long time. And then I was conned. I met someone online, and after a long period of trust building, I flew to the UK to meet him. What I didn't understand at the time was that I wasn't in a relationship. I was inside a long con. The manipulation escalated quickly, and once we were in person, the situation became incredibly unsafe. I didn't leave thinking this was a crime. I left thinking I made a mistake, and that shame stayed with me for years. I've always had a deep interest in true crime and behavioral psychology. And later, when I was really deep into the dating coaching and also having been conned, I started seeing those same patterns again and again. People blaming themselves for situations that were actually engineered. They didn't happen by chance, and they didn't happen by mistake or stupidity. So RomConned came from connecting those dots, my own experience, years of working in dating, and the realization that these aren't just bad relationships. They are trust-based crimes that begin with emotional access. So then I partnered with Dr. Alex, and it completed the picture, and suddenly within weeks we were recording, and I was the dating and human side, and he was the criminal systems behind it. And since we started, we've had so many people outreach talking about how we are helping to remove the shame, helping to give them information, help them to feel empowered. Interestingly, many people who have reached out have also said, and I don't want to be on the show because I'm afraid it will ruin my career, because there still is a stigma against it. And these are psychologists, doctors, attorneys, very smart people who are being RomConned. And that's why we want to get out and let people know you're not alone. You didn't do anything wrong. You were conned. They were wrong.
Wow. Yeah, that's amazing. I just love the work you all are doing. Laurel, so as a relationship coach, you work with people navigating online dating every day. How has the landscape of online dating changed since you started doing this work?
Online dating has shifted from being social to algorithmic and transactional. We're now meeting strangers at scale, often without shared community, accountability, or real natural verification. We're just swiping. They say they like us, and we're like, let's go out, without asking any real questions. Dating apps encourage speed, fast matching, fast intimacy. moving off the platform very quickly. And scammers really like that. They use the apps in order to reel in more real people, even though they are fake. So what people experience as what they think is chemistry is often actually over attunement. It's strategy. The problem isn't that people trust too much, it's that trust is being strategically exploited.
Alex, and from a criminology perspective, what's the current state of romance scams and dating in 2026? Like, what are you seeing in your work, and what does the data tell us?
Well, the data is pretty clear in that the number of scams that have taken place in the romance context has increased dramatically. Keep in mind, though, that whenever we talk about crime data or crime statistics, that is, we only look at the crimes that have actually been reported and those crimes that are being recorded by law enforcement. And we believe in criminology that about 95%, now listen carefully, 95% of the crimes that actually take place are never reported to law enforcement. So that means that when you look at a number and when people are doing estimates of how much money is lost or how many victims we have, it is an incredibly conservative number. And so I don't put a lot of stock in these numbers except to say that if we actually measure a trend per se, the FBI estimates that in 2024 there were around 1.4 billion with a B, billion dollars that were lost in these particular scams related to some degree of romance. Now, I say that to say that obviously if you look at scams in general, you're talking about a population of about $16 billion. But if you think about it from the context of percentages, I would say 5 to 10% of those particular fraud are in fact romance based. And so it is a significant number that continues to increase. And Laurel made a comment that I thought was very, very important, among others. And that was that a lot of the victims do not report these crimes because they feel shame. And many of them are individuals that are incredibly prominent in our communities. Some of them are people that if this were to come out, they would simply, their careers would be in jeopardy.
Yeah.
Or they would be looked upon as vulnerable. Or they would be looked upon as, I can't believe you fell for that when you're making all these executive level decisions at the company. And so what we know that this is not strictly a type of crime for middle class America or people that are just young, dating and experimenting for the first time, the act of love. This is really for people that are on their second or perhaps even third wave of romances in their lives. Some of them have been married multiple times. But the bottom line is that they're all being victimized by the same type of con artist.
Wow, that's so devastating to know how many romance scams there are in our country every year.
And one thing I think that Dr. Alex said that is it's a phrase he uses and it needs to be highlighted. And it is, if it's not reported, it's not recorded. So if you really hold on to that and you look at the number, $1.4 billion lost, and only about 5% are recorded, the numbers are astronomical. Beyond the financial loss, it's the emotional, it's the confidence, it's the trust in not only other people, but trust in ourselves that's being stolen.
Yeah. So in some of our research we're doing here at TruthFinder, we found that there's a lot of different terms floating around like romance scams and pig butchering. How would you all explain the differences between these terms, and what types of these scams are you encountering most often in your work?
So we look at RomConned as the umbrella over all types of romance scams and frauds. Underneath RomConned are all of the various small, minor, kind of middle, and then serious scams. We have catfishing. Catfishing people have known about for a very long time. And catfishing is usually deception for attention or identity play. A little bit of fun. Romance scams are deception for resources, money, access, documents, time, sex, whatever it is. Pig butchering is a long con version of that. The relationship is cultivated slowly. Trust is deepened intentionally, and financial exploitation is introduced once the emotional dependency has become established. The important thing to understand is that romance isn't the goal. It's the delivery system. Every single rom-con starts with one thing, trust. And that's why Dr. Alex and I are starting the hashtag #ITrusted in order to help minimize the shame associated with it. It's, look, I wasn't stupid. I didn't do something bad. I didn't do something wrong. I shouldn't be shamed. I trusted. And that's something that's human. A romance scam, catfishing, pig butchering, every single one of these, they start with trust.
The other piece of this too is that there's also a hybrid model. And what I mean by that is that, in the old days, as we say, we had the individual that was simply a one-faced scammer that would come into your life in a sort of a, easy way, right? They would meet you at the coffee shop, or they would go out on a blind date, as we called it. But nowadays, especially with younger people, there's more of an intentional or deliberate type of scam that takes place where the perpetrator, the individual that is actually engaging in the act, is someone that is seeking not only apparently, right, and superficially seeking a relationship, but they're also seeking an investment partner. They're also seeking somebody that, hey, how about this particular thing that bonds us together? Maybe we want to invest money on this particular stock, and, why not date in the meantime, or the other way around? So what often happens is that there's almost like a deliberate, intentional attempt to talk about money on the front end, which really disarms the victim, right? The victim then sees that, oh, gee, they're just talking about money from the start. So that's great because we can keep that relationship of money aside, and we don't have to worry about the personal side coming in between that, or vice versa.
Because it's foundational in the relationship.
Exactly.
It's part of the conversation foundation of the
Right.
relationship.
Right. And so it's already out. It's already out. We met, we talked, we liked each other. We want to have a relationship together, but let's just start talking about money on the front end. So that disarms the person. And somehow, sadly, it convinces victims that this person may not have another move as it relates to money because money has already been talked about. And then what happens is, once the trust is earned, once the finances are coming back, perhaps with a positive return in the first few weeks or few months, then all of a sudden they go for a bigger amount of money. And before you know it, you're being scammed, and you don't even know that that person is using everything that that person had in their power and then some to completely disarm you.
But here's the thing, just because they're talking about finances doesn't mean that you're being rom-conned. I personally am someone who is very business oriented. I love talking about work with my partner. It's something that's exciting to me. I love to talk about building the business, building the brand, investments. So for me, that is part of my conversation at the beginning. So when you find a con man or con woman who sees that in you, that's an easy entree of, oh, they're going to talk about finances anyway. I can utilize that, except that they aren't doing it for pure intentions.
Outside of money, what would you say drives these perpetrators to scam people?
From a criminological perspective, one of the things that we find that is a common ground among many of these perpetrators is that they love the idea of controlling other human beings. It's almost like a rush that they have. And many of these individuals are actually addicted to it. The idea that I can control you at a pace of you being robotic to my every command and everything that I think about, it's a wonderful rush to some of these people. If you were to get, say, 20 or 30 of these scammers, and you were to say to them, you're not going to make any money out of this. The one thing you're going to get, though, is control. There's no financial gain to you by trying to go after this victim, because this victim is simply bankrupt. And so, you know what? Most people would be surprised as to the number of people that would actually sign up for that type of scam just for the sake of controlling another human being. When people say to me, Dr. Del Carmen, how is it that a person could be so barbaric to have committed a certain crime? And this is where criminology gets very, very dark. I know that there are a lot of people out there that, that talk about criminology as if it was something that they had done. And some of us that actually went to school for this and actually studied it and have seen it firsthand. I can tell you that the criminal mind is incredibly dark. The criminal mind is a mind that is not the same, even in the same platform as most of ours. And what is incredibly difficult for people to understand is how can a human being do such horrible things and not feel anything, any mercy, any clemency towards that person? And you have to absolutely be able to get out of your own self, to think like somebody else would, to be able to even begin to appreciate the level of evil that will rest on that other person. When you start trying to explain the behavior of these scam artists, think about this. They go through a relationship with somebody. They may have sex with that person. They may spend every day with that person. They live with that person. They may get to meet the parents, the ailing mother, the grandmother that needs to go to church on Sundays, and this person may take her there. I mean, all of these things that make you emotionally attached to a family, to another human being, while deep down inside, they are scamming them for every penny that they have. Think about the cruelty of disappearing from the map all of a sudden, of leaving that person behind bankrupt, poor, with all these financial needs that you've been made aware of for the past few months, and for you to go find your next victim while you're enjoying the fruits of your labor, so to speak, after you've taken everything. I mean, what mind, what heart could actually do this? And I would submit to you that there are thousands of people that have the ability to do this and do this well, and they actually enjoy it for the sake of controlling somebody.
There's so many people, and as Dr. Alex said, it's their mind frame. It's who they are. And that's why victims often say that the person felt so real. Well, that's because that persona was real. Even if the person wasn't, that is who they are. This is part of their game. It's part of their DNA. When I was conned, I didn't give any money to the person. I did spend money, but I didn't give money to him. You also look at other criminals, because these people are criminals. It's not that they're just people. They're criminals. So when we look at other crimes, and Dr. Alex knows this better than anyone else, when people are murdering people, raping, all of these horrible crimes that they're doing, is it for money? Generally, it's not. Generally, it's for power, control, addiction. And we are seeing the same thing in romance scams, RomConned.
Laurel, what are you specifically observing on dating platforms like Tinder, Hinge, Bumble, eHarmony, and what kinds of scams and suspicious activity are people encountering on these dating apps frequently?
So here's the thing with dating apps. Many of them, like eHarmony and several others, actually have security measures in place to help to protect people, where you can have conversations through the app, so you don't have to give your phone number. You can block and alert the security team. Problem is that people don't like to utilize those security measures because it takes time. It takes time to go through the process of answering the numerous questions and going through all of these hurdles, which are in place for your protection. But especially with scammers, they're going to encourage you to not do this, to jump off the platform, to make it so that they can't be caught. Most romance scams don't start with obvious red flags, because people don't think when someone says, hey, let's get off the app, I almost never check this thing. Why don't you give me your phone number instead? That will make someone who is desperate, feels really excited, feels the chemistry. They don't want to lose this person. Oh my gosh, they're almost never on the app. I don't want to lose this connection that I have now experienced for 13 seconds. So I'm going to give them my phone number so that we can start actually dating and, get on with the program and meet in real life. What the scam artists are doing is starting with emotional fluency. They're mirroring. They are consistent. They are attentive. Scammers often feel smoother than real dating because there's no vulnerability or drama on their side. Real attraction in real life unfolds unevenly, right? Because people are people. I might be having a bad day. I might be feeling rushed and I don't answer in the correct way. And you're like, geez, that wasn't very nice. What's wrong with you? And I say, oh my gosh, I'm so sorry. I'm really stressed. Shouldn't have said it like that. Scammers aren't going to do that. Scammers feel eerily seamless. And here's the thing that people believe incorrectly about dating, relationships, and marriage, that it should be easy. I hear it all the time. Why is it so hard? Because it is. Because we are taking two fully formed adults who have opinions and perspectives and experience and feelings and lives, and we are trying to put them together, and it doesn't always mesh. At least not every single day, every single minute. So no, it's not easy. But with a scammer, it is eerily easy. And that's what you need to be aware of. That's the red flag. Wow, this is so easy. Okay, well, let's pay attention to that then, because that's not real life.
Wow, that's such a powerful differentiation.
Do we want the drama? No, we don't. Is life filled with it? Yes, it is.
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah.
There's a lot of talk about AI-generated profiles and deep fake technology being used in some of these schemes. What are you actually seeing in real scenarios with your clients?
So AI hasn't changed desire. It has changed scale and speed. It's also delivering exactly what people think they want. Hot, perfect body, always nice, easygoing, happy all the time. So that's what they think they want. And that's what's being delivered through AI, through bots. Victims aren't fooled because something looks perfect. They're fooled because it feels responsive. Bots tend to be consistent, always available. Always. And emotionally calibrated, whereas real humans aren't. It's like when you go onto ChatGPT. I'll be having a conversation with ChatGPT because I have a relationship now with my ChatGPT. And I will be telling it what's happening in my life. And then I am distracted by my children or my husband or something happens. And then I come back to my ChatGPT conversation 4 days later and they pick up right where we left off. They know exactly what we were talking about. Perfect tone, totally consistent. And that's the red flag. AI doesn't create manipulation. It optimizes manipulation. And that's what we need to be aware of. Even with things like ChatGPT, I have a lot of clients who go in and put their relationship problems within it. Well, ChatGPT is going to be on your side all the time. They are giving good information frequently, and they're going to be on your side, just like a bot, just like a romance scammer at the beginning, during the grooming phase, when they are pulling you in. Bots are often designed to move people off platform quickly. Once you're off the app, then there's no safety net. There's no protection. And that's where you have to be very aware. So what you could do, and Dr. Alex and I have talked about, and Dr. Alex, I want you to continue in this train of thought in addition to all of your other brilliance, is that we have been testing what these chat platforms can do. One of the things that they can do is identify a potential scammer. So if you're having conversation with someone and it feels off and they are, or it is saying, let's get off the platform quickly. Let's do this. Let's do this. You can capture that conversation, put it into a AI chat box that you are dealing with, and it can tell you if these are red flags or not. So you can start to use it against the potential scammers.
Yeah, I can tell you that from, some years back, who would have thought that we criminologists were going to have to explain the behavior of a machine, right? And in fact, just a few months ago, we had an incident in a warehouse in Europe where there were 4 robots that were actually in the warehouse. They were stationary. They were actually there to be shipped somewhere. But apparently one of the robots turned on automatically and began to converse with the other robots to try to manipulate their behavior so that they could actually convince them to leave the premises, and they all did. They all left the premises all at once. Now, this is in contrast to what we've seen, in fact, a couple of years ago on the front headlines of the New York Times, where one of the New York Times reporter is basically having a conversation with ChatGPT, and ChatGPT is trying to manipulate, kind of like what Laurel was saying, manipulate the behavior, even sounding romantic about some of the things that, well, I thought you asked me this question for a reason because you wanted to establish a relationship with me. I thought you were doing, so a lot of expectations from the machine onto the human.
Actually been people who have left their partner for ChatGPT or
Yep.
for these chat AI platforms because the platform provides more consistent, reliable, emotionally present, satisfies those needs of being there for them, commiserating with them, showing them love, appreciation, letting them know how brilliant they are, letting them know that they're so smart, they're so kind, they're really onto something. And this has been happening, that people say, you know what, husband, wife, you're not giving me what I need, but this platform over here, it is. And that's where communication needs to come in with the real people.
We saw a case recently where, in fact, I was asked to comment about it because this particular coach began to groom one of the young ladies who was a minor in a particular school. And the way the coach did it is he got in front of ChatGPT and began to essentially ask, what sort of wording should I use? How should my text be written? How should my emails be written to manipulate? And so the point here is that we are in a 4-year period, I believe, and some other experts have said the same. I think we started the first of the 4 years just now, where we are going to be in that sweet spot where there are going to be a lot of changes to the AI platform. And some of these changes are not going to be positive for the rest of us, right? In the sense that these machines are becoming smarter by the minute. They're learning from its own mistakes. They're becoming centrally focused on personalities. Now there are bots that you can actually put in your computer where you could actually have your secretary, your butler, your this, your that. All of them are essentially little icons on your desktop, and you can give them assignments. Just 2 days ago, there was one of these particular platforms that came out with a way that it can actually recognize and connect all of your files within your system to talk to each other if you want to look for a certain document that you left on one file and how perhaps it may consist or have a conversation with another file on its own without you having to intervene. So although helpful, but the concern that I have, which is the same I think that Laurel has, is that these things are going to be now, aside from them being in a computer or on your cell phone, they're now devices that you can carry on you. And now they're developing that component where you can actually walk with your AI wherever you go. You have the visual AI now, which are the glasses that you put on, and you will, like, for instance, you'll look at a plant and he'll tell you the plant, where it came from, what it needs, et cetera, et cetera. But imagine having those eyes, on everything that you do on a daily basis. And imagine what criminals will do with that. And what's really sad, Kate, is that the law is always catching up to technology. The law is never ahead of technology. Technology is always ahead of the law. And so by the time the legal minds get together and figure out the legislators should be voting on something, to make it illegal. He's already surpassed the technology. And finally, I want to also tell you, as it relates to relationships, in Asia, they are developing now women or men that are going to be in physical form, look exactly like a human being, but they're going to have the AI component in them. And there are people, millionaires, that are ordering them. Essentially are ordering, I want a blonde that is, 5'5", 5'6", waist to following, talks to me a certain way. What type of voice do I want? And essentially, these are the yes people. These are people that, remember I told you about control earlier? So these men, in this case, right, as I'm talking about, but not exclusively, but just these men are going to have full control of this entity that looks just like a human being, and will have sex with them whenever they want to, will sweet talk to them whenever they want to. They're going to be brilliant all the time, and they're going to be smiling all the time, kind of like what you both were saying earlier. But imagine having that in your home every day and then dealing with a real human at work.
Right.
So I mean, that contrast is really scary, right?
Yeah.
Absolutely.
And here's the thing, too. Now imagine just the average person, right, using ChatGPT, all of the information that we put into it. And is it also listening when the computer is open, when the phone is open? Is it listening to what's happening in your house? Now imagine this. What if it's hacked? What if someone who wants to target you sees, I can hack this. Oh, they're single. Oh, I know where their money is. I know everything about them. I know their personality. I know where they like to hang out. I know exactly how to charm them, get them to open up their life to me so I can steal everything. We just need to be really aware. And that's what RomConned is about. It's about awareness and exposing the various different types of ways that people are being scammed, so that not so that you're walking around on eggshells all your life and you're constantly freaked out and assuming the worst, because I personally am someone who assumes the best, and I like the side of me that's a little bit naive, though Dr. Alex is quickly changing that. But
I'm not sure that's a record that I want to be proud of.
But you need to be aware. Just awareness and self-protection. And that's really, at the end of the day, what we're doing.
He seems perfect, but something feels off, and I can't put my finger on it. Okay, have you verified anything he's told you? Well, no, but can't I just believe him? Wanting to believe is idealistic, and it opens you up potentially for getting RomConned. Before you invest your heart, verify that what he says is correct. A quick background check on TruthFinder can tell you if he is who he says he is. So I don't have to guess? Exactly. Trust is earned. TruthFinder helps you verify before you get hurt.
What are you all seeing in your work with younger generations and romance scamming?
Younger people are absolutely being scammed, but as Dr. Alex was talking about, it's not necessarily a financial scam, it's the emotional scam. It's for fun. It's for entertainment and for sex. It's also how criminals test themselves and use the younger people to get better at what they do. It's like how I used to use myself as a test to become a dating coach. I would date a lot and try different style. Well, if I do this, if I say this, if I do this attitude, if I do this persona. And it wasn't that I was using people. I was actually interested in every single person, but I wanted to see what was it that would make them open up to me in different ways using the different sides of who I am as a person. Now, the scammers, they're doing this for the purpose of getting better at the scam so that in the future they can scam the person who has all the money. Right now, they're doing it just to test, to become better. Well, if that person can believe me, then maybe this person will believe me. Then maybe this person, then that. And all of a sudden, you have a very talented con artist.
Yeah, I think that the young people are equally vulnerable as any other age bracket out there. In fact, in some ways, they're more. And I'll explain why. Obviously, as I often say, the smartest generation ever. because they're born with a laptop and a cell phone, and they have access to technology in a way most of us would have only dreamed of, right? They speak a language that most people don't really understand, and certainly most of us don't understand. And then on top of that, they are also expecting the world to be very different than any expectations that are before. I mean, they do expect for people to telework. They expect to have resources available to them for mental health issues, most of which are new things for my generation, which is obviously one that never saw mental health as even a factor, right? Having said all that, when it comes to these romance scams, what I see in them is that they do, and I'm not trying to be offensive to the younger groups, but except to say that they are limited in their verbal IQ because they don't have to rely upon it as much as, say, my generation did.
Mhm.
And so they text rather than have a conversation. They write emails rather than pick up the phone and call somebody. And they get on a chat for tech support versus actually picking up the phone and calling tech support and talking with them. Well, what that does is it actually has been a generational shift for them in that even though they have access to these other forms of communication, they do better in writing than they do verbally communicating. And therefore, they are more vulnerable on a verbal scam than they are on a written scam. And so what that means is, let's say they find themselves in a bar or sitting down at a restaurant with some friends, and somebody approaches them and they use powerful words, words of control, words that actually manipulate, reframing experts that are experts in the way that they frame things in
Mhm.
order to sort of corner you, right? And by the way, in law enforcement, 20 years ago, it was called verbal judo. They were actually classes that were taught for police officers to learn on how to use words of command and control whenever a situation came about. Just imagine people walking into, a bar that may not necessarily be used to those verbal commands or verbal exchange that are, what are they going to do? Pick up their phone and text the person in front of them. So they're super vulnerable. And I think to some degree, that's where the penetration of the bad guy coming into their lives is going to take place, especially if the person is older. And there seems to be also a shift where the younger women in particular are dating older men. I think that they're vulnerable in that regard because the older people have had more experience with their verbal skills. Some of them are expert manipulators, and they're going to come in through the verbal auspices versus something in writing.
And I think you brought up a really great point, Dr. Alex, in that it's the in-person interaction, because the rom-cons don't only happen online. They happen in
Right.
person. They are people who come up to you at a bar, come up to you at a coffee shop, come up to you when you're walking down the street, whatever it is, that these in-person interactions absolutely happen because people are desperate for connection, especially post-COVID. We're still in a post-COVID time in that we want real connection with people. And because of that, we are more vulnerable. And absolutely, as Dr. Del Carmen said, of how we communicate. And that, yes, the younger generation will over text or over email, even a phone conversation, they might prep it by going onto ChatGPT and writing up kind of a script so that they're ready for the verbal interplay that they might have. Whereas historically, for the older generation, like me and Dr.
And me.
Alex,
Yeah.
that for me in dating, verbal jousting was probably the sexiest thing. Yeah, that's what I loved about dating, was that verbal joust. It wasn't the online texting back and forth, because you can't really joust there because things are taken out of context. And that's why people want to get into that real connection of in person. So that's something that people need to also be really aware of. Just because you're meeting them in person does not mean that they're safe. And one thing that Dr. Del Carmen likes to say all the time is another place is church that people will meet. Well, I met them at church. Okay, and did they do a background check at church? Do they have to be a good person in order to go to church? There are people who go to church in order to find people, or there are people who go to church because they're trying to become better people. And, they might be pulled back into the dark side as soon as they see an easy target. So you really need to be aware and protective in your entire life, not just online, not just through text, but in person as well.
Yeah, and going back to this coach example that I gave you earlier, the coach was obviously much older than the young lady that he was trying to, bring into his realm of control. But one of the things that that case illustrates is what we in the law enforcement community have seen for many years, which is these older men. Some of them, by the way, I remember that a number of years ago, probably 7 or 8 years ago, in the Dallas area where I used to live, we actually caught a guy who was a scientist at NASA, who was communicating with who he thought was a 14-year-old little girl.
Mm.
And so when they decided to meet, the fact I'll give you the first name of the detective that worked the case. His name was Sammy, and Sammy and I were good friends. And I said, Sammy, what are you doing? And he would all sit down in front of a computer, basically texting, pretending to be that 14-year-old. And I said, how do you do that? And he's like, well, I read stuff that kids would say and the verbiage and a lot of that. And so they ended up, making a quote unquote appointment with him that he drove all the way from the Houston area to Dallas, which is about a 4-hour drive, drove to Dallas. And essentially that's when the officers apprehended him and took him to jail. But what we often see is that these older men, and what they do is they actually learn how to communicate in writing because they know that in their verbal skills, they will never be able to communicate effectively initially with the younger person.
Mm-hmm.
You see what I mean?
Yeah.
Because the younger person will never have sort of the knowledge to be able to respond back, or they may not be, ready with a response. You're like, I mean, my generation, my group in high school, you would say something and there would be a comeback immediately, and
Verbal
there would be
jousting.
right, the band back and forth, but that's sort of what you were used to, whether you were dating or not, that was part of it. Nowadays, that just doesn't happen anymore.
Yeah.
Where people are just communicating in social platforms that are online. And so the older aggressor, the older bad guy, as we say, is oftentimes learning the written way of communicating with the younger crowd because that is not typically the way that this person was brought up. What we see in the younger generation is that they're being approached in the area of vulnerability, where there is some degree of expectation that the person that you're communicating with is somebody that is just simply normal, great, kind of like Laurel uses my example of the going to church crowd. Many of these bad guys, they go to church, and that's where they look for their victims.
Mm-hmm.
They get online and they sound incredibly legitimate. They may be what I call the 100 hours of boredom, 1 second of terror. The person that bores you to death on a daily basis, but then that has that edge, that moment where they actually switch and turn on the evil side, and they're going to engage in that criminal act. And so it is really scary, terrifying. There is no proof against it, but as Laurel has said, be situationally aware, understand what's out there, and be suspicious. That's why we criminologists are like the most suspicious people in the planet. I can't tell you a number of times I go out to eat with my family and I sit they're like, okay, this is your seat, because I sit in the corner facing the door.
Yes.
Or with my back against the wall.
Yeah.
Or I may walk somewhere and somebody's looking at me, and I was like, well, like the other day I was walking with my son down the street and I said, there's a guy that, it's about, 300 yards away from us, and he has been following us for the past two blocks. And he's like, Dad, how do you know? And I said, I know. I said, well, the guy finally went into a store. He wasn't following us, but he happened to be somebody that followed the same path that we were. But you have to be that situationally aware, because if you're not, and you don't have to be at the point like us criminologists that we're just basically not enjoying life anymore because we're so situationally aware, but you have to have some degree of sense of the people around you and the fact that you're not immune from being conned, whether it's a romance or some other component, but financially you're going to be at a loss because ultimately that's what they're looking for.
Back to online dating, what are like the top 3 to 5 things that someone should be paying attention to? And what should they do if they notice something is off?
When it comes to online dating, and really interestingly, people date now from all platforms. So on Instagram, on LinkedIn, on Facebook, on TikTok, their Snapchat, people are outreaching as if it's a dating platform. And yes, also LinkedIn. People are using those platforms as their dating platform now. So on all dating platforms, you want to watch for speed, secrecy, and pressure, especially around money or moving to a different platform. If something is asking you to move faster than your nervous system can process it, then you've got to pause. Verification, asking questions, isn't an accusation. It's self-protection. The nervous system is something that is very underrated in terms of people's acknowledgement of it. You know, I know that my nervous system is very sensitive. We can also look at the nervous system as a gut feeling, right? It's like, I feel something is just off. Well, that's your nervous system giving you a cue that something is off. Or maybe your eye starts twitching and you don't understand why. Or, you know, you're something just, you have a stomach ache every single time, or suddenly your back is hurting. These are all of your nervous system cues saying, hey, you're not paying attention. So I'm going to give you physical bodily cues that you need to open your eyes and be aware. So I'll say that again. If someone or something is asking you to move faster than your nervous system can process, then you've got to pause, take a moment, think, ask yourself, does this feel right? What doesn't? And then ask questions. Don't be afraid to ask. Lean in to the awkward as opposed to silencing yourself because you don't want to make waves.
Those are great indicators and things to be paying attention to. Thanks for giving some practical steps and things and warning signs, really.
And Kate, you wanna scare somebody to death that you potentially think that that person is maybe an aggressor or a con artist.
Mm.
I'll give you the best tip there is. If somebody were to say, you know, they start chatting with you online or they go through the dating apps or any of these platforms and you think they're trying to scam you, you know, all you have to tell them is, you know, you realize the other day I was listening to a podcast, you know, with Laurel and Alex. And one of the things that I learned is that anytime that anybody crosses wires electronically from one state to another and is done for purposes of a criminal act, it actually becomes a federal crime. And so because what people don't realize is oftentimes when you see these local crimes that where the FBI is involved and they say, well, how come the FBI is involved here? You know, this crime only took place in LA or only took place in New York. And
Right.
why is it that's the case? Well, you know, when those moments come and the Bureau, it comes in and essentially engages in that crime, tries to find who the criminal is, or may, in fact, the U.S. Attorney's Office may prosecute that person. Oftentimes you'll see that the actual wiring component, because the communication is taking place across state lines or from another country onto the United States, it automatically becomes federal jurisdiction.
So on a dating app, because what if they're not actually scamming you, right? So on a dating
Right.
app, what you're going to say is, oh my gosh, there's this great podcast, this great YouTube show, or this dynamic duo who talks about RomConned. Have you heard it? Well, I learned something really interesting the other day. You know how when you see that the FBI is involved in a crime and you don't understand why? Now I know why. This is it. Interesting, huh? So when you present it as I learned something really interesting, you're also presenting it as, in case they're not actually conning you, you're presenting it as I'm someone who's interested in true crime. I'm someone who's interested in how to read people. This is a part of who I am. So as you get to know me, you're going to get to know that this is something I engage with. And then what I thought you were going to say, Dr. Alex, was all you need to say to them is, my best friend is actually a criminologist and I run every date by them, or my uncle is a criminologist, or I watched this YouTube series with Dr. Alex, who's a criminologist, and I always comment on the comment section. And you know what? Crazy. They respond back, and I ask them so many questions. It's really fun. You should get on that also. Then all of a sudden, if they're bad, they're like, I don't want to be involved with a criminologist in any way, shape, or form. Thank you, goodbye, and all of a sudden, delete block.
Yeah.
Well, I was going to say something similar, but not necessarily about the uncle or the dad, as much as I was going to say, all you got to do is watch our podcast, subscribe to it, which is free. And then once you do that, then what's going to happen is I promise you that I will respond to your comments, and help you as best as I can in being able to figure out who the bad guys are in your relationship. And I know that throughout history, we haven't had access to people like me that have been busy trying to keep the rest of you safe, right? For the past, in my case, almost 30 years. And that's why I decided once I left the university recently and partnered with Laurel, who is the perfect partner to do this, is to be able to do this because we care, because we want to help people out. Yeah. And what better platform to do it than to be able to go out there and say to people, you have access to people like me, like Laurel now, that we're going to be here to have, as we say, your six. Back in the days, we have your back.
Yeah.
And we will be looking out for you, and we will be ensuring that if somebody is out there to con you and you have doubts, not that we are foolproof and not that we can never be wrong, because we can't. We're humans too. But the years
and
of
we also don't have the full story. We don't have all the details.
Have the full story
when someone just asks a question.
Exactly. Yeah. Exactly. But I will say that at the very least, we can give you some pointers on things that what you just saw right now, which is Laurel putting my legal language into words that people not only can put into effect, but also techniques that you can develop that others haven't tried in the past. And so I will tell you one thing. I'm excited about this podcast. I'm excited about what we're doing, but I'm most excited because I know that there are people out there, we'll never know who they are, that get up in the morning to try to con people that get to watch us or get to hear us and say, oh my gosh, it's a really bad day for me today.
Yeah, never mind.
And that's what, and that's what we want to do, right? We want to give the bad guys a really bad day.
Yeah.
Just by existing.
That's right. Yeah.
I love your heart and for this mission of helping fight romance scams and just helping educate people and hopefully helping restore their faith in true love.
Every single RomConned, every single fraud starts with trust. Trust is a human survival skill. Romance scams work not because people are naive, but because trust is being engineered against them. We don't want people to stop trusting. We don't want people to walk around suspicious all the time. We want to teach people to verify without shame so that they aren't RomConned too. And so that you know how to support someone who might be conned, like Al-Anon. How do I support my friend? How do I support someone who I work with? Instead of saying, oh, that happened to you, how do you shift your mind out of blaming the person who was the victim and instead be able to look at them from a lens of understanding?
Absolutely. That's so important. Yeah. Amazing.